As a Franciscan, I have a great love for our San Damiano crucifix. That's the name of the crucifix that you'll see all over the place. It's the crucifix in the year 1209 that St. Francis of Assisi was praying in front of, and it seemed to come alive. And Jesus said to Francis, "Go and rebuild my church." And so for Francis, this always was a very special crucifix, and certainly us Franciscans, we love it because of its history and the origin of Francis's vocation. That being said, I can't stand that crucifix. Did you ever notice Jesus looks just far too relaxed? Right? As if the cross is just some little minor convenience. He's kind of just hanging out, relaxed, a couple little paper cuts, no big deal. You see, somewhere along the line in Christian history, we're going way back, there was something like an amnesia that overcame us. We've forgotten the horror of the cross. And so art or symbolism or icons began to portray the crucifixion in ways that were far too mild. So for fear of running the risk of turning your stomachs, let me explain to you briefly what a Roman crucifixion actually was. There were only two groups of people who were ever crucified. If you were anybody and you committed a crime that deserved capital punishment, the Romans just simply executed you. No fuss, no nothing. It was not a big deal. To get crucified, you had to be one of two groups, and only two groups. You had to be a slave, because slaves were not considered fully human. So they deserved the cross. The other group were people who were political revolutionaries, those who were working to oppose the Roman authority or overthrow Roman authority. If you revolted or in any way opposed the claim of the Roman Empire to its political power, you were crucified, to make a point. Because the Roman crucifixion was specifically designed to take away people's humanity and reduce them to animals. And offer that as some sort of a public announcement that this is what happens when you oppose Rome. Normally, crucifixions happened in large groups. The Romans would hold on to prisoners till they had a critical mass. They would rarely crucify small numbers of people at once. And so Good Friday, with only 3 people being crucified, was rare. So normally they'd wait for a crowd of criminals that they could crucify all at once. And the Roman soldiers would make it a sport to see creative ways that they could beat, injure, and be cruel to those about to be crucified. They would outdo each other in cruelty. And when their sport was fully enacted, when they could no longer come up with creative ways to hurt these people, then they would either take a single beam or a whole cross and place it on each individual person's shoulders and force them to walk to the place of crucifixion. They would start at one end of your hometown, and you would walk through the main street in the middle of the day or early morning when everybody was out, so everyone, all your friends, your family, your kid, everyone could see your shame, and you would walk with your cross on your back through town to the other side of town, always upwind. And just outside the city gates or the town boundaries, along the main street, they would crucify the whole group. As if to put up a giant billboard before entering town. Now, Jesus' crucifixion of only 3 hours was also very rare. The average length was about 6 to 7 days. They would put you on the cross without any clothing, and you would stay there till the last person died of dehydration or exposure to the elements. And as you were there, the animals of the field and the birds of the air would come and begin to eat you alive and feast on the soft part of your bodies. And as these animals would do this, the wounds would begin to go rancid and fester. And the reason that you were upwind from your home was so that the sound and the smell of your dying bodies would waft into town, and your loved ones would hear and smell your agony. And then after the last person died, they would take everybody down at once, and with large hooks, spear your body and drag you one by one, your rotting corpse, back through town the same way that you came, to the other side of town, and bury everybody in an unmarked grave. That was the horror of a Roman crucifixion. And St. Paul says to the Corinthians in the second reading today, the cross of Jesus, the proclamation of our Christ and Him crucified, is a stumbling block to some and folly to others. Of course. How could it not be? How could we, with serious minds and straight faces, say, oh, our Messiah, our God, suffered Roman crucifixion? And not just that. No, not just that. Not just the idea that the true ruler of the world would die in the most dehumanizing, most shameful, most lowly of ways. But Jesus said, if you wish to follow me, could you imagine? He said, you will have to take up your Roman cross and follow me. No wonder most of the people in Jesus' day and age didn't believe him. No wonder most of the people in Jesus' day and age rejected his message. What folly, what stupidity, what ridiculousness. How could this possibly be? But this is the heart of St. Paul's proclamation. This is the heart of the gospel. This is why Jesus in our gospel goes into the temple and flips the tables, drives out the animals, because in Jesus' day and age they had totally warped and perverted the understanding of what God was calling the people to. The temple had become, for the Pharisees, justification of their agenda to judge and ostracize people, to establish standards of purity and moral demands that no one could live up to, and then to push people aside and divide everyone. This culture of purity that the Pharisees were pushing, the temple had become a model of that for them. For the Sadducees, the temple had become a justification of their love of wealth and luxury and opulence and power. They thought the temple justified their love of all these things. And for the Zealots, the temple had become for them a justification of their love of war and bloodshed, a desire for violent nationalism, to kill their neighbors in the name of God. The temple had been corrupted by the political agendas of all the different factions of Jesus' day and age, and it had failed to live up to its real vocation to be a sign of service and humble wisdom for the world. And so Jesus goes into the temple, flips the tables, drives everyone out, and says, tear it down. the holiest place on the planet, the place where God himself dwelled. Tear it down. I'm going to build a new one. Can you imagine a Roman cross replacing the sacred temple? But that's what Jesus says. This is what Paul proclaimed. So let me ask you, have you flipped any tables lately? Have you stared down the corruption of institutionalized religion and all the ways that our Christian communities have too easily fallen back into the ancient errors? Have you flipped those tables? Have you torn it down? We desperately need cross-carrying Christians today. We need you to be willing to carry a cross, not buy into the agenda of all of the ancient errors. Too many people today in our Christian communities have regurgitated the errors of the Pharisees, thinking that the real goal is to divide people along lines of moral purity. No! Have you flipped the Pharisees' table? Too many people today use Christianity as a justification for their love of wealth and power and their ignoring of the poor. Have you demanded that they tear those structures down? Too many people today, and it's all over the news, use Christianity as a justification for their warped sense of nationalism and their warped sense of violent patriotism. They say Bible in one hand and a weapon in the other. Have you flipped their tables? Goodness gracious, those tables need to be flipped really badly. We desperately need people who are willing to imitate Jesus to go into the world and demand of our fellow Christians that we stand with Jesus, not the Pharisees, not the Sadducees, not the Zealots, who warped the temple and caused Jesus to cause a ruckus, to tear down what was thought to be so sacred and replace it with the horror of a Roman cross. We need you. We need your courage, your faith. The future of our Christianity in this country needs your willingness to imitate Jesus's flipping tables, but even more so, the courage and the countercultural wisdom to carry a Roman cross. Please believe me when I say, this is foolishness to our world. This is weakness to our world. But the foolishness of God is far wiser than the wisdom of our warped world. The weakness of God is far stronger than the pretend strength of our culture. We need you. We need your faith. Join me. Let's flip some tables. Let's carry our cross.